Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of One Plus One, your place for inconvenient truth telling and myth busting. This is a very special edition because I do follow politics, but we normally don't follow closely local races that happen in different countries. But we're breaking this, but we're going to be breaking this rule. And joining me this evening is, and let's pray let's pray I don't butcher the name, Ivan Stoiljkovic. Did I get that right, Ivan?
Not bad, not bad.
Perfect. Ivan Stoiljkovic, who is running for the mayor of Kingston, Ontario, and he's not running for any party, and he's going to explain why that is the case. But I think it is safe to say that he is running on the left wing platform, on the People's Power platform. So, but before we get into specifics about that, Ivan, just introduce yourself. Talk about what are some of the main issues that you're going to be campaigning on, and then for our international audience and even Canadians who may not even follow local local politics, explain why when running as a mayor of whatever town hall, why you basically have to run as an independent, even though you are running on a left platform.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, that's a huge question with a lot of parts. I'm from Yugoslavia, which blew up. It was a socialist country and blew up in a civil war with the revival of fascist forces in the early 90s, which is why I'm here in Canada. My parents sent me away. It was my mother's dying wish to get me out of Yugoslavia. And in 92, I ended up in Kitchener, where there's a lot of immigrants from former Yugoslavia because it's an industrial area. And there's a lot of work in the factories and so on. And that seems to attract immigrants who don't necessarily have the language skills that are required to live in places like Kingston, for example. Kingston is a small town right in between Montreal, Ottawa, and Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
2 hours away from Ottawa, 2 hours away from Toronto, 3 hours away from Montreal, and it's an administrative center. It's an old capital. It's the place from which Sir John A. Conceived and carried out his campaign of ethnic cleansing, and it is still a very old-fashioned city in a sense that it doesn't have a big immigrant population, right? And there's no industry as such. It's administration, it's prisons, it's universities, it's government jobs.
I see. Interesting.
So sorry, I don't even remember why municipal, right? Why municipal politics? It's interesting. You're not alone in kind of not paying too much attention to municipal politics, especially in Canada. And I think that's by design. I think that there's, a concerted effort on the part of the establishment politicians to keep this quiet.
Yeah.
In general, they don't like to draw attention to themselves, and it seems like the art of neoliberal governance is the art of pretending not to be doing anything. But on municipal level, that really works, and it's really worked.
Interesting.
And no, for sure. And even the pamphlets that they distribute that are supposed to be neutral and they're supposed to get people to vote,
Mm-hmm.
even those pamphlets are prioritizing issues such as roads and garbage collection. So people are supposed to think that municipal governments basically take care of garbage and roads, and nothing else happens.
Okay.
Uh,
Interesting.
Meanwhile, actually, housing decisions are made on municipal level. It's state power. Like it's municipality has control over what gets built. It has control over zoning. It has control about bylaws which make a difference in people's lives. Whether bylaws that decide whether it's illegal or illegal to live outside. Zoning, planning. Cities are planned by municipal governments. So it's really municipal government that makes the decision whether or not we're going to continue to build sprawling suburbs like it's 1950s and bridges to connect them, or whether we're going to focus on creating public transit service that saves the environment, and that whether we're going to build high, whether we're going to build at all, and what we're going to build, and so on. So this is something I discovered quite late in my, say, political career, although it's not, there's no such thing as my political career. I've always just been a uh, bottom up or organizer of the poor and marginalized people from
That's
the.
fast. That's fascinating. So it seems as if I mean, obviously, if you wanted to get into politics, of course, why not run for the riding of Kingston, Ontario, and become a senator. But it sounds to me as if somebody's living within a community, and whatever happens, in Ottawa goes way past their heads, but they do want to see immediate change to certain things in a place like Kingston, Ontario, or Winnipeg, Manitoba, which is having a big mayoral race. You actually can get a lot done at the local level. A lot of power will be invested to you, depending on, of course, who are your partners and who and which and who are your partners and who will approve, say, single payer healthcare or pharmacare or mental health care being merged within a single payer system, or free education, or at least very very low cost education, right?
Yeah. Another thing that's interesting about municipal politics is that as you mentioned there is no official party affiliations, right? So like people don't run as liberals or as NDP or whatever. But what's interesting is that we all do, not all, but many of the municipal politicians do belong to parties. And it's funny how, people that pretend to be hating each other across the aisle of Queen's Park or in Ottawa
Mm-hmm.
are very friendly in municipal within the city hall. So in Kingston, for example, 4 years ago, this latest council of 13 people was elected, and the first thing that the council did was one of the first things that they did was the conservative mayor, like the mayor who belongs to the Conservative Party, struck up what he called Mayor's Task Force on Housing and Homelessness, I think it's called. And he put as co-chairs a councillor from one of the districts who was who's an NDP person, belongs to NDP, and a liberal.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and the rest was mostly landlords and developers, of course. But there we go. Conservative mayor, liberal and NDP co-chairs, a bunch of developers and landlords, real estate agents, and such, and that's who determines in a very amicable manner. The together comes together with recommendations to essentially hand over all the housing money to the landlords and developers in order to increase the stock of housing, which will, of course, according to all of them unanimously, which will inevitably lead to more affordability of housing.
Interesting.
Very
Interesting.
interesting, very interesting, especially given about 30 years of evidence to the contrary. Uh, you know. giving all the money to the developers to build for-profit housing for some miraculous reason does not trickle down and does not make housing more affordable. It in fact does the opposite. It inflates the housing and rental prices, and it creates homelessness. So
Funny enough, that's exactly one of the issues I wanted to talk to you about. So let's get to actually, yeah. So let's actually. I'm gonna skip this first question, which is what are some of the issues you're going to be addressing, because you already sort of alluded to that, and I'll just already get to the second question, which is this. Now, if you were elected and you can work with your colleagues in local government and deal with the issue of homelessness, now how is it that in Canada, which Americans keep lionizing as this liberal left utopia, why does homelessness how is it that homelessness is allowed to exist in a place like Kingston, Ontario, and how would you deal with the issue of homelessness?
Yeah, good question. That for the most part, that story about Canada being, some kind of liberal, or well, it is liberal, but social democratic, let's say,
Yeah.
or something, is not true. And in case of homelessness, it's worse. Why? Simply because of the weather. If you're homeless in LA, you're not gonna freeze to death. In Kingston, people are losing their toes. People are freezing to death, literally. So Winnipeg,
Wow.
north, they're being homeless at -25 is torture. It will endanger your life, literally. You will lose toes. You will lose limbs. You might die. People do die. So um, it's the same social formation. It's the same system, essentially. I've been across the United States, and I have a lot of friends who live in the United States, and we communicate. And you know, in some ways, some of the places in the United States are more humane than some of the places in Canada. I think of Canada as
Interesting.
I think
Okay.
of I think of Canadian provinces as various states, different states. You know what I mean? They're similar. So like California is more progressive than Alberta. You know what I mean?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
New York State has a lot higher standard of living than New Brunswick or something. So you have anyway. It's everything that you see in the United States, everything you see in the movies, everything that you see happening in the United States is happening in Canada too. We have you know we have encampments, we have entire what they call favelas in Brazil. I mean, there are people permanently living outside, and the state is permanently committed to them living outside, and it's chasing them around. And again, I mean, varies from city to city. In Toronto, they have some pretty strong programs which get people into motels over the winter months. In Kingston, because the big part of our economy is tourism, our city hall, NDP, liberals, conservatives all together are dead opposed to getting in the way of motels being made available for the tourists. So we have this kind of constant battle between the downtown tourist industry and poor people, whereby the tourist industry, the small business owners, the big business owners, are demanding of their politicians, and by there I mean the politicians whom they donate money to, such as the current mayor Brian Patterson. They demand that they deal with these homeless people running around scaring the tourists. So in a twisted way, I would be doing them a favor if I were to find a way to house the homeless people in Kingston, which I will find a way, which is not rocket science. So that's I'm a part of the platform. We call the platform People's Platform for Kingston. I'm not the only one. I'm the only one running for mayor on this platform, but I have friends which hopefully you might invite us in the future to I'll introduce them as well. But there's a bunch of us running in different districts, and our platform calls for elimination of homelessness in our town, and straight up, that's the first order of business: eliminate homelessness by providing rent geared to income public housing.
Can you repeat that again? By providing what kind of housing?
Rent geared to income public housing.
And
Rent,
explain that.
rent geared to income. Yeah, well, thank you. That has to be said because affordable doesn't mean affordable anymore. When the politicians say affordable, what they mean is literally the definition of affordable is in Canada right now 80% of average market rent. So that's not affordable.
Exactly.
That's
Exactly.
average
Yes.
market rent is average market rent is double, triple, quadruple in some instances of what people on welfare, for example, are supposed to live on. It covers the entire minimum wage. Um,
So are a lot of people home? So a lot of people. I mean, there's so many reasons why people become homeless. I mean, we would even have to dedicate probably an hour or two show just on that topic alone of homelessness. But are a lot of people in Kingston, Ontario, homeless because even if they do have a job and two or three jobs, they simply cannot afford the rents, let alone even getting a mortgage. If some are lucky to buy a house or get conned into the housing market, and the moment that they can't pay or the moment that wages don't match up to the cost of living, this is why so many people just are one paycheck away from becoming homeless. And then of course when they are homeless, that just spirals out of control, since it's such a traumatic thing that can happen to somebody, and you can't really think about getting to work if you don't even have like a place to rest your head and wake up in, right?
exactly. I mean, so many people I know that are working. They're working full time. they're living outside. They don't have a home. Uh, it's the situation is such that at this point it's almost like you could have all the money in the world if you don't have the references from your former landlords, or if your credit rating is not of a certain number, whatever, over 700 or something, you can't get a place. So you could show up. I mean, I know people who have shown up to viewings of apartments where they're literally saying, waving cash at the landlord, saying, I have a job, I have the money, please, no. So the
Wow.
landlords have so much power at this point, and this is not just Kingston, it's across Canada, that they are able to pick and choose who they're going to rent to. And in Kingston, we have, it's a retirement, it's an attractive, I always used to say, because see, Queen's University is here, right? Queen's University has made quite a name for itself for being, racist and sexist, and being kind of ultra kind of uh, a conservative place, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is where the no means yes campaign originated. It's they have these huge parties every year where they just it's a disaster. It's like
Like a celebration of
chauvinist
violent
fest.
masculinity and
Yeah,
rape
yeah,
culture.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But no, I remember always thinking when I went to Queens too for like grad school briefly. Well, not that briefly, but anyway, that's how I ended up in Kingston. That's part of the story. But I remember thinking that if I were, one of these like white rich supremacist, like white rich people from Toronto that own whatever. If I was the 1% of Canada, and I didn't want my kid to mingle with Serbs or people of color or you know other different people, I would send them to Queens. So that's that's like what we have here. I mean, that's a part of. I don't know why I brought that up, but uh,
been interesting because these were lots of the sort of like regressive, oligarchs.
right. So the thing is, like, the city is full of people on permanent vacation. People from Toronto who are 35 years old, who finished their uh, the studies and are now ready to retire because they're so filthy rich that so they're touring the people places like Kingston. I mean, Queens is for a lot of Queen students, it's not about education. It's a party. It's like you go to party for 4 years. It's a vacation. It's a 4 year vacation. So the city spends millions of dollars to build them a beach in case they want to spend some of the summer here. A lot of people spend summer here because there's a nice beach. A lot of students and they're just having a really good time
Wow.
and then on top of that, I mean, there is the whole entire tourist industry that Kingston is catering to, which is again, all these filthy rich people from all over the world, but mostly from the States and other parts of Canada who are here to enjoy the what they call, our heritage, which is really the history of the construction of this colony, this genocidal, colony that Canada is, that got built out of here. So there's history, and then there's, just enjoyment, and it's really good. It's a paradise for white supremacists and for rich tourists,
It's you know
and they're the ones that get these apartments. So if you want an apartment in Kingston, what I mean, this is who people are competing with. So my friend who doesn't have a place to live but is working a full-time job and has saved up money and has cash to get move into somewhere, but she happens to have tattoos, and her former landlord doesn't like her. She's going up against a millionaire that decided spend you know to spend their sabbatical in Kingston, or that's spend a few months or a few years here, and who has whose daddy's friends are all landlords and
Wow.
they provide references.
But in order to stop landlords from having so much ridiculous amounts of power, what kind of legislation would you like to see drafted and put into law in order that people don't become homeless so easy, and you can take power away from these private landlords, so that yeah. What would you do on that? On top of course, making sure that housing itself is a right, not a privilege for the plutocrats.
Well, that's another great question. Um, Again, I don't want to get bogged down in talking about good and bad landlords. I believe it or not, I don't think these oligarchs are necessarily bad people.
Hmm.
And the landlords that are choosing between a tenant that looks like they're gonna pay and then they're gonna be quiet versus a tenant that doesn't look as, I don't know, as likely to be a good tenant in any instance. It's they're just doing their job. That's the job of the landlord, is to make money renting renting their place, and it's their job to preserve their property so that it rises in value. The reason that's So what my issue is not with bad landlords and good landlords. I don't expect a landlord to want to help anybody. It's not their job. Their job is not to help people. Their job is to, you know, realize a profit out of people. Uh, that's why the issue here is that for the last 30 years for sure, but probably longer in Canada, we have Mike Harris, officially kind of started that, but in Ontario, but we have relied on private landlords and on the market in housing to provide housing for the people. Uh, we cannot longer, we can do that. The results are in. There's a lot of homeless people, and there's, way too many people choosing between food and rent and choosing rent. There's, we can't rely on that. So it, the big picture is we have to build rent geared to income, social, democratically run public housing, like we used to in the 60s and in the 70s and in the 50s, right? Like all these, social housing units that you see in Toronto and Winnipeg, in Vancouver, everywhere, and in Kingston, they were built in 60s and 70s. They look decrepit and horrible because they haven't been fixed since the 50s, 60s, and 70s. They are ghettos, and they're dangerous, and they're not. Nobody wants to live in them. Why? Because people are poor, and because people are turning on each other, and because people have no choice but to survive, and surviving on $700 a month on welfare, or surviving with 2, 3 part-time jobs, and raising kids and having no access to daycare and so on, is gets ugly. Sometimes it gets ugly. So that's the situation. We have to attack that entire situation by just flooding the market with rent geared to income social housing, and that will in itself make it harder for-profit landlords to continue to carry on the way they do and to make as much profit as they do. But specifically, okay, like to answer your question, there are bylaws
Mm-hmm.
that govern what, and these are municipally determined bylaws that determine what landlords can and cannot do, and so on. So, there are property standards departments that have, for the most part, been, defunded and erased. In Kingston, for example, we used to have 6 property standards officers who were in charge of taking complaints from tenants and going after the landlords who don't, deal with the bugs, or don't deal with maintenance issues and so on. Well, this administration has managed to get rid of all of them. So, the Department of Property Standards is underfunded. Property standards officers don't exist. They're, it's been downloaded to bylaw officers, this job, and they're not doing good enough job. So, I mean, the least we could do is rehire the people that were fired and then boost this department, and we can change the bylaws. We can change the bylaws right now. The bylaw stipulates, for example, like pests are a big problem for people in not in just in Kingston, everywhere, but in Kingston. Homestead is the 4th largest real estate investment trust in Canada. It is based out of Kingston. They have a
Mm-hmm.
lot of houses, a lot of buildings here. Many of their buildings, half of the buildings that they own in Kingston are overrun by cockroaches, bed bugs, uh,
Wow.
and uh, and the way. So what the bylaw requires. Imagine that. So these are buildings with, like, I don't know, 10-story buildings with, I don't know, 15 apartments on each floor, or huge buildings, right? And completely, like the entire buildings are taken over, right? All that the bylaw currently requires is for the, I mean, of course, you have to, beg your superintendent and then your property manager, and, got to go up the chain to that faithful property standards department. And then if and when they get somebody to actually come in um, to examine the situation, if they indeed find the bugs in your apartment, their power only goes so far as being able to uh, force, under the threat of fine, the landlord to treat the unit. You know what I mean? So
Unbelievable. Wow.
every every tenant has to independently go through the process of climbing up the ladder to achieve this great goal of having the landlord come in and treat the unit. What happens is the landlord finally decides uh, to hire an exterminator who's always a private contractor, and they make the deal to pretend to be, treating the apartment or to treat it at the cheapest possible way, and the bugs are back within a week inevitably, and then you have to go through the whole process again, and that's basically it. So they don't even get fined, and
Wow.
the bugs are having a feast, and their children telling us in schools, about how, once a month they have to back everything up, and it's bug treatment day, in some of their buildings. And
Well, we gotta. Well, geez, I've learned so much on just housing alone and slumlords. So we have to. So us
sure, sure,
leftists, we
but
have
I
to.
mean,
We have to tackle that subject more because wow, that is very criminally overlooked. That and how to even. Yeah. Anywho,
the solution? Sorry, the solution. I mean, what would we do is, of course, change that bylaw
yeah.
so that the threat to the landlord is greater, and so that they have to actually treat the building. So we could change the bylaw so that it reads not you have to treat the unit, but you have to get rid of the bugs. And if I see a bug in your building after, you know what I mean, after one was reported, if there's another one within a month, it's not your building anymore. So that's, for example, what we can do. That's the bylaw that the city has power over, that can change. And we can declare a public health emergency. We should declare a public health emergency over this, because this is causing people to get sick. This is, living with bug. These things spread disease, and the treatment itself is poison. And there are different kinds of treatments. There are healthy treatments. There are treatments. There's a heat treatment, which is very effective. It has no there's no chemicals being used, and it works, but it's a lot more expensive than throwing around some chemicals and in the crevices
And
of the
that is a perfect segue to this question of mine because another reason why people are homeless is because some people can't afford very expensive dental care. Some people can't afford overpriced mental health care. So I wanted to, and of course, there's the topic of pharmacare, which the current federal government has no interest whatsoever in addressing. So I wanted to ask you now. Uh, Now, I would imagine, are you in favor of merging dental care and mental health care with Canada's single payer system, public option system? And if so, what would you say to our right wing friends? Our right wing liberal friends, our right wing NDP friends, our right wing conservative friends, and I would imagine even some of the Greens and the People's Party of Canada when they say that you're only going to further burden the poor and the working class because it's way too expensive. If you merge dental care and mental health care into our already costly single payer system, you're going to make the nurses have a nervous breakdown because it's even more things that's already added to their busy schedule. And why do you want to eliminate wonderful competition that's in the private dental health care and private mental health care profession?
um, that's okay. So what I would say, what I find from what I'm researching here and what I'm finding out in municipal politics is that, we assume that the taxes that are raised by the government are raised from the money that they're taken from the rich, and that they're invested in services, universal services for the poor.
Yeah.
That's not true. So, first of all, that's not true. The taxes are taken from the poor. In fact, in municipal politics, for example, there's a provincially legislated, it might be federally as well, the case, but anyway, law that cannot be changed. I don't think it can be changed. If it can, I will change it. But it stipulates that you can only charge uh, taxes on properties that you can't charge property taxes higher on people on for-profit landlords, for example, than on housing, people who own their own houses, right?
Yeah.
But there's like a normal family working hard, has a mortgage, they have a house, and their property tax is 2%. Then there's Britt Smith who owns Homestead, and his is the same. So now what happens is, we're unable, the government is not allowed to raise the taxes on Britt Smith and keep the taxes, or lower the taxes at the same time on a struggling working class family, right? So that's generally the case, right? I've listened to Bob Ray go on about this, how the only way to collect money for universal programs is to increase sales taxes, which are regressive, which are taxes on poor people, right? Like
Yes.
cigarettes, the gas, like all this, the regressive taxation. So first of all, the taxes that the government collects are not the taxes, is the money from poor people. Now the rich people, they find ways to not pay taxes, and they're also now where the money that the poor people give in taxes goes is, for the most part, it goes into the pockets of filthy rich. So Galen Weston, for example, who owns Loblaws, gets gets subsidies, gets money, literally money, millions of dollars from federal government, because he's an exemplary green citizen, because he wants to buy fridges in which he's gonna, for his superstores, for his grocery stores, where he's gonna keep dairy and milk and dairy and meat, right? So like, think about that. You know what I mean? We have a military budget. We're a member of NATO. We have to spend so much money on our on the war effort, on the conquest of the rest of the world. So that's where a lot of money goes.
Two
And again,
percent, 2% of Canada's GDP, and
yeah,
anyone who has the privilege of being a member of NATO.
yeah. So money goes to military, money goes to Galen Weston, like here in Kingston, a lot of money is going straight into Brett Smiths, into Jay Patchers, into these oligarchs, landlords pockets to increase the supply of housing. Even the healthcare itself, like, is based on a very capitalistic model. Doctors are basically businessmen. So the model according to which they behave, and this varies province by province. I hear it's better in Quebec, but like in Ontario, it's a small business. You're not a doctor if you're not good at running small business. So you hire nurses, you hire secretaries, you rent a space, and you basically, and then you're charging per. It's not per visit; it's per issue type thing. So if somebody comes in and says, my heart hurts, my head hurts, and my belly hurts, the doctor says, sorry, I can't work that we'll just deal with the belly today, and then in 2 months you can come back and fix your head. So you know I know that doesn't directly answer your question. Of course, I believe.
Well, but actually, no, but it's no, but actually, it's very good that you mentioned all of this because basically you're laying to waste the idea that if you merge, dental care and mental health care into a single payer system, first of all, you're not going to burden the poor. You're actually going to be helping the poor and even the precarious middle class who can't afford, the costly dental procedures it takes, or the fact that they have a disease which is coming from the gum, which the moment it affects their stomach, they have to go to a hospital. So that's going to be all taken care of. But then, second of all, if people when you say to people that, oh, NATO, only 2% of your GDP is going into militarism, that's really not a big deal. But I had Tamara Lorenz, a big peace activist who does a lot of anti-NATO work, and she was explaining and when she was explaining to me word for word what 2% of GDP goes into NATO, basically you could eliminate indigenous poverty, you could eliminate homelessness, you could actually merge mental health care with a single payer system, and who knows, sky's the limit, but you could even have very low cost education prices, or even make education free. So anywho, so continue with what you were saying when it
And
comes
government
to.
could make money, government could make money. Government chooses not to be in businesses that are profitable. You know what I mean? The government has basically, neoliberal governments over the last 30 years in Canada and across the provinces have gotten out of everything that was profitable. So government could make money, government could tax the rich, and of course the government could provide services in a way better way than right now, so the doctors are not forced to be businessmen, and so that healthcare is not about whatever.
Profit.
So, yeah, it's not about profit, so that the hospitals are not run by businessmen. I mean, look at any board of any hospital in Canada, and there's bankers there, there's real estate developers, there's you know it's basically business community running the show. So they're detonating the system from up above. They're doing it on purpose. Everybody knows what's going on. They're running the system into the ground so that they can show that it's ineffective, so that it would be privatized, and
Do
they
you think
believe.
and do you think if you and do you think not only would it be a huge advancement in Canada's quasi single payer system, very frail public option system? Do you think if you were to merge dental health care and mental health care into a single payer system, that you would not see so many people, become so many people driven into homelessness, as well as having a lot of financial problems?
No question about it. But I mean, before that, I think housing, food, transportation, medicine, right? Pharmacare. Let's say pharmacare is a key to this. But by pharmacare, I mean, so this is what our People's Platform for Kingston is calling for. It's to house people, to and then the other two big pillars of our campaign are to expand and make free public transit, and to provide a food program, to set up a food program that is municipally run, that again would be nothing. I mean, it's just, it costs almost nothing to cook good food for a large amount of people. I know that because as a member of my organization, Karakwa Union of Tenants, we've managed to feed about 100 people that are hanging around the homeless people every day throughout the winter, on nothing, on literally, like, we hardly had any money. Everybody would contribute that one meal a week or once every 2 weeks or whatever. It costs you $50 basically to cook some soup and to make some sandwiches and to provide a meal for 100 people. So you know why couldn't a municipal government introduce a food program that helps people? And it's not just food, it's good food. So most of the food supply, so-called food supply, is poisoned, and most of what people have to resort to is this fast food industry that should it should be banned. It shouldn't exist. Like, this is not food. This is poison. Literally, people are
Yeah.
getting poisoned with sugar and salt, and they're getting sick, and they're getting diabetes, and they're losing their limbs over this, and so on. So good healthy vegan food is we can provide this for everybody in our town. It would be nothing for it would be it would cost nothing. It's cooking food en masse and just delivering it to those who can't pick it up, and it's nothing. And so that's we want to make sure that there's a safe supply of medicine, that people are who are on what they call drugs, are these are pharmaceuticals. Heroin is a name given to a drug by Bayer, German pharmaceutical company. Morphine, same. Fentanyl, which is what people are using now. These are all invented by pharmaceutical industry. They are medicines, and these drugs are killing people because they are criminalized, because they're dirty, because they're coming in unpredictable uh, amounts, and everybody, not everybody, almost everybody that is currently addicted to opioids has been addicted to opioids by the pharmaceutical industry in the
Mhm.
first early years of the century, when doctors were encouraged to prescribe these drugs at will, and to tell people that they're not dangerous or addictive. So so we need that. We need, if you look at the homeless person who is addicted to opioids, you know they first of all, they have no place to live. They have no money, because if they have a check, it's $300 or so on homeless. So if they have some kind of address, maybe they can get 700 on welfare. It doesn't matter. 300, 700, that's gone within a few days on food and on drugs. Like, and then beyond that, they live, the rest of the month, 3.5 weeks of the month, they live on nothing. If these people were given, a place to live, if they were given food to put in their belly, and if they were given medicine that they need, and if they were given free pass to ride around on public transit, there's no crime. There's no people walking around scaring tourists. There's no suffering. There's nothing, and
Exactly.
it costs almost nothing. These are cheap
And
things.
and how would you approach pharmacare? Would you nationalize the big pharmaceutical industries, or would you just or would you just negotiate with them that there's price controls over how much they charge the customers, their clients, how much an antidepressant costs, or how much this aspirin costs. So would you make sure that the government is the middleman, and making sure that that the people don't get that the people don't get screwed over in whatever price gouging, but at the same time you would also make room for a kind of nationalized pharmaceutical industry in which you would make sure that it's much better regulated than some private pharmaceutical company.
Pharmaceutical industry is one of the biggest private pharmaceutical industry. Privatized pharmaceutical industry is one of the biggest murderers known to humanity. They're responsible for mass suffering and death. We can't even. I mean, I'm not a doctor, but I've studied this too, and I know a lot of people who are in the medical profession, and it turns out that their main priority is making money, and that people are, for them, basically a vessel for that realization of profit. So literally what's happening is people's bodies are vessels for pharmaceutical companies to process their product. And it's kind of, when you really think about it, the whole welfare system is in some ways a way for was, at least earlier, uh, uh, is a way for people for pharmaceutical companies to realize their profits. Sorry, I'm getting off track a little bit. There's no excuse for them to exist. They're extremely dangerous. They've convinced everybody that
So,
opioids.
so, so if you had it your way, I don't know if I don't know if you'll even have the power, but if you had it your way, you would definitely nationalize the pharmaceutical.
This is really like way above the municipal level of government. But of course, we should nationalize it. And of course, we should put it. You know, the whole look. Why are people becoming doctors or pharmacists in our society in Canada? Almost, they won't admit it, but everybody knows it's for the money, it's for the status. That's
In fact, a friend of mine who studied neurology, pharmacology, and her original dream was to be both a psychologist and psychiatrist. But she was saying to me that she was very disturbed when each time she would ask people why they wanted to study psychiatry, why did they even want to be a psychiatrist? It wasn't, oh, I actually really want to help my patients, or I'm a compassionate person, I really want to help my patients. It was always about the money, 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 money.
that's the
So
issue. That's the fundamental problem. You know what I mean? Like we have to reverse that. So doctors must not get paid more than janitors. We have to like create a situation in which people are going into medicine because they want to help people cure. Cuba has something like that. We really need to look into Cuba.
yeah,
Cuban doctors are like spending their lives saving the world, curing the sick all over the world, and they're getting paid no more than anybody else. And that's why, how come Cuba is able to create doctors for the entire world, and over here we have Ontario College of Physicians that's restricting the amount of people that can practice medicine in order to keep the price up. They're like medieval guilds, like that's how it works. You know what I mean?
wow, okay,
They're fighting they're fighting doctors from other countries from being able to practice in Ontario. They're fighting, the universities that want to enroll more people into medical degrees and so on. So to keep the price down, it's all about money. It's sick. It's crazy. It's like totally crazy, and that's the problem. So when you ask me about pharmacare and dental, of course there should be fully public. Of course there should be fully available to everybody. But it goes way beyond that. Like we have to change the way we think about health. We have to change. We have to focus on food first of all. We have to eliminate the need for all these drugs. You know what I mean? Like morphine. I know a nurse from former Yugoslavia who basically a nurse. I know nurses from former Yugoslavia, my mother's generation, my mother's friends,
yeah,
and family, and so on. You know, opioids were only used at, for terminal cancer patients and excruciating, extraordinary, unbelievable pain, like kidney stones or something. Like this was not. They were under lock and key. It was super restricted. You know what I mean? Why? Because it was a socialist country. Because there was no money to be made of in pushing this. Because it actually cost the system. So you know what I mean? The state had an interest in not prescribing unnecessary drugs out. So we need to get back to that. We need to find ways to cure our sick with food and with rest and with
yeah.
various other forms of healing. Like that's what I want to see. That's what I want to do in Kingston. Is I want to start creating these healing centers where people are gonna have like rehab centers. Like there's no rehab, man. Like it's almost impossible to get into rehab if in our town. It's you have
Because
to have,
because they also are privately held.
and they're so rare, and like again, the state doesn't want to have anything to do with it. But you have to basically not be an addict in order to get yourself a place in rehab. Like they expect you to be to show up for appointments, to show up weekly to have a phone on the ready when when the call comes 6 months from now. They expect you to behave, you know,
Wow.
to
And that's a perfect segue then to this question, which is which is, would you like to see Kingston no longer be no longer engage in the war on drugs? And with all that being said, where do you stand on the issue of police brutality? Are you for radical reforms of the police, a community control over the police, or are you for abolishing the police? But if you were to abolish the police, you would do it by having all of these anti-poverty programs, as well as community control over the police, because Glenn Ford did say that if you do want to see an end to police, you have to have community control over the police so that you can get to that level. Where do you stand on ending the drug war and what to do with the police? Radical reformation, or it's time to seriously look at abolishing them?
it's in all the it's an all debate on the left, right?
Yeah.
We've always been, divided between people who believe that um, this goes for prison abolition as well, right? That some of the left believe that we all need to be free of police and state incarceration and violence, and some others believe that uh, the wrong people are in jail. I believe the wrong people are in jail. I believe that police is, you know, going after the wrong people. So uh, uh, drugs should be not only legalized but available for free on demand. Drugs, food, housing, those things shouldn't cost money
Yeah.
because they're necessities of life. The reason people take drugs is because they live under a fully formed genocidal colonial capitalist regime society, which I mean, translation, a very violent regime in which people are under constant threat of death, suffering, and violence, and in which people
So they consume the drug, whether it's the pot, whether it's the heroin, whether it's the ecstasy, as a form of escapism. They can have some kind of some sort of escapism from the constant trauma and daily hassle that is living under a capitalist system.
drugs are not the problem. The problem is what people have to go through to get their drugs. The problem is, the people don't die from clean drugs. People die from either from dirty drugs, or they die from not eating because they have to have their drug. They die from not sleeping. They die from not being able to. Anyway, we already went over all this, but to go back to the police question, our platform calls to defund and demilitarize the police and,
Perfect.
and reinvest into various community services. So I think that the police needs to be retrained from being a repressive force against poor people to being a compassionate force for poor people, and compassionate whatever. and I think that we have to start uh, going after real criminals. There are people who are cooking numbers to make it look like there's fewer homeless people out there than there are. There are people who have awarded contracts to their friends for to increase the supply of housing, knowing full well that this will create homelessness, and through homelessness, death and suffering. These are the people that police should be investigating. They're so on the one hand, I would like to. There's no need for guns. There's absolutely no need for the police force in Kingston to be fully, militarized and armed with all these weapons that they're armed with, because nobody's shooting at them. Nobody's ever shot at them. That's an extreme statement. It's probably not true, but like I've been
Yeah, I know
I've
what you're
been
trying
here
to say.
20 years. I think there was maybe one instance when there was somebody firing something in the general direction of the police. But also the cruisers. I mean, your Kingston Access bus service is riding 20-year-old buses that don't work. You know what I mean? They're constantly in the shop. You know, uh, police cruisers are updated every year. They have the latest, meanest machines. Again, maybe there was a car chase once or twice over the last 20 years that I was here. And, it's kind of a stretch to even assume that there was actually somebody running. You know what I mean? They create the situation. Like I mean, well, so they don't need the weapons, they don't need the kind of training to they don't need to torture people, they need to leave people alone. Sometimes there is community control, of course, community policing. I mean, we need, in Cuba, again, they have these neighborhood associations where people come together, and if there's like a domestic violence situation, a bunch of neighbors come in, intervene in the situation, and dissolve it. And so you shouldn't have to risk losing your children.
So you would like to see an end to what I would call neo-Dickensianism, this very classist, racist, punitive punishment that's often enacted a lot on the poor. So if a single mother can't pay for her rent and she has a young baby, they take the child away from them. We know Indigenous communities and Black communities have faced all sorts of classist slash racist treatment like that. So you would like to tackle all of that. In other words, stop punishing the poor for being poor. Actually, help out the poor.
I'd like people to feel safe
Yeah,
to call the police. You know what I mean? Like I would like the police to actually be serving and protecting people. So if you are afraid of getting hit by your partner and there's two kids in the house, you call the police comes and prevents him from hitting you, takes him away, puts him in jail, whatever. But you're not, it is not at the same time a sentence for you to have to now deal with Children's Aid Society, or you have to now deal with not just Children's Aid Society, but with police, right? The police continues to show up and continues to have you in a file and whatnot. It's like maybe not explaining this right, but like it seems like people are afraid to call cops. Like perfect example. People are doing drugs, somebody overdoses, people are afraid to call the cops because they're going to come in and say, who sold you the drugs, who has the drugs, aha, I see you three with the drugs here, everybody's going to jail now. So people are literally dying because they're afraid to call the cops. Nobody wants to hear the sirens, like and that's the irony. They call defense department, the Department of National Defense is actually the Department of World Conquest. The
exactly.
police forces are serving and protecting, but in fact they're torturing and incriminating and violating and incarcerating people. So yeah, I guess I don't know if that answers your question, but that's basically where we're at right now. I mean, I don't think we're ready to disband the police force and let people kind of there be Wild West. So because that's just gonna make the strongest people even stronger. So but we don't need this much money invested. We don't need to fire police officers, but we definitely need to disarm them. We definitely need to take their toys away, and we
Yeah.
definitely need to change their attitude and their
Mindset, how they approach it, and build a force which is not supposed to be the classist, racist institution it was originally meant to be, but people who are there to help out the community and deal with extreme situations of violence and organized crime.
Same with like the model of police, authority, like the hierarchy, the way it works. The people on top are never the victims. They're never the community, people in the community. Like, I mean, there has to be a strong voice of wrongfully accused. There has to be a strong voice of people who have been criminalized and shouldn't have been criminalized in overseeing the police force and being the police force. Same with housing, same with healthcare. Like the boards of hospitals should not be businessmen. It should be people who have experience being sick. It should be people who have experience being curing people or whatever. Same with housing. Tenants should run public housing. Don't forget that. That's we're not going to have landlords, developers, and housing managers with masters of business degrees running public.
Oh boy, I would love to live in a world like that. Two quick final questions before before we end the program with the questionnaire, because you have a campaign to get to. Is how would you deal with the grievances of not all of Indigenous people? I mean, you would have to run for prime minister or leader of a party for that. But how would you deal with the Indigenous community within Kingston, Ontario? What would be some of the how would you deal with some of their grievances so that better race relations between Indigenous people and biracial Canada advances rather than how would you deal with that?
So I am almost certainly, well, I'm certainly almost 100% certainly a settler, because I came from Yugoslavia in 1992, and as far as I know, my roots are all down there. That is hard to say for most people, that especially there's people that claim to descend from Mayflower. The longer you've been around here, the longer back you go, the more likely you're not white. You know what I mean? So my favorite thing to do to white supremacists is to question their whiteness, and in Europe as well, because Roma people and Jews have been hiding, and for a very long time, Romani in particular in Europe and indigenous people in North America were the only people that had moral standards that were not oppressive. In other words, I think that's important to note, that it's really hard to separate people here, and these attempts to count blood cells and to tell some of indigenous leaders that I know, such as Bob Loveless, who's an elder here and a chief of our the Algonquin people north of Kingston, that they're not indigenous. That's not okay. That's race science. That's Nazi science.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not okay with Nazi science. So we're not going to count blood cells, first of all. But why do I say that I'm a settler? Because I say that because that means that I have to recognize that I am not going to be determining this policy. It's not up to me to say what needs to be done about centuries of genocide and continuous ongoing genocide, ethnic cleansing. Children's aid societies are in many ways worse than residential schools. 7 out of 10 children born to indigenous person are taken away from them, like right now. So number one, indigenous people are way overrepresented among the poor.
Mm-hmm.
So if we among the homeless, among the all marginalized, there's like intersections of levels of how oppressed people are, and indigenous people are winning in all the categories. So housing people, feeding people, free transportation, uh, rehabilitation services, healing services, all this stuff not only will go a long way in righting some of the wrongs and helping indigenous people survive, but all of these things need to be
Prioritized.
not only prioritized, but again run by indigenous people, not only by indigenous people, but the indigenous people need to have a really strong voice in how we're going to heal,
Okay, interesting.
because they have experience healing and because they need healing, and because a lot of what we've done, what our settler colonialism has done in North America is very, very wrong.
Yeah.
And we need to recognize that this is not just a matter of settlers taking over indigenous land. This is a matter of settler colonialism as a system, destroying the people as a whole and the land as a whole. We've lost our way. The mad bull lost its way. So that's how we need to see our society, and that's why we need a lot of input and leadership from people who lived in a way that didn't create this catastrophe, this apocalypse that we're going through. There would have been no global warming if Europeans didn't colonize North America. You know what I mean? There would be no children's aid societies. There would be no residential schools. There would be no torture as such in that sense. So I was always, when we were kids, in the 80s, when we watched the movies, between the black and white westerns, my parents taught me to be against the cowboys, to be with the indigenous people, because that's the way we were. And so when I came here, I've always listened and paid attention, and I've always looked for guidance from the people of this land, and I'm going to continue to do so. So I don't have a straight up answer. I'm just going to help people not continue to get tortured and marginalized, and their culture and their bodies destroyed by this
Well, Ivan, I'm gonna skip this other question I had planned. You have a campaign to get to, so but before I let you go, we usually end the program with the questionnaire, which was done by Marcel Proust, later done by the French broadcaster Bernard Pivot, and later my hero, the late great James Lipton of Inside the Actors Studio. So it's your turn. So it's your turn to do this questionnaire before you have to go. So all right, so let's get underway. So first of all, what is your favorite word?
love.
Love. What's your least favorite words?
Words.
Least favorite words. What's your least favorite word?
And I guess it would have to be hate.
All right. What turns you on emotionally, spiritually, or creatively?
Sorry, go again.
What turns you on emotionally, spiritually, or creatively? Like, what's something which really, like inspires you?
uh, Music, food, books, company, friends.
Fantastic. And then what turns you off then?
uh, Pain, loneliness, cold, coldness in people.
Yeah, exactly. What is your favorite curse word? And yes, you are allowed to curse on the program.
Fuck. I love it. I love it. I use it way too much.
Likewise, likewise. And what sound or noise do you love? Follow about, yeah. What sound or noise do you love, and what sound or noise do you dislike?
Um, Violin.
So violin is a noise you love, and then what's a noise that you
Violin, I
dislike?
love, and well, bombs falling. That's the sound I don't like.
Yeah, I can definitely imagine. And what profession, if you weren't doing the wonderful social justice work that you do, what profession would you love to do, and what profession would you absolutely not want to do under any circumstances?
I love driving. I just want to drive. So I do drive. I'm a bus driver. I was a taxi driver. I was a delivery boy. I just can't get out of the car. I just want to drive a car. uh, what do I not
And
want to do?
yeah, what profession would you absolutely not want to do under any circumstances?
So much that I don't want to do. I'd hate to be a doctor. I hate to like a surgeon or something dealing with blood and disease and
Yeah.
not my
and then
cup
the
of tea.
and then the final question is, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates, or whatever is the afterlife of yeah, or whatever is the afterlife that you imagine is the afterlife?
Oh, I, wow, what a question. I should have prepared. I heard your podcast before, and I made a mental note to prepare, but I forgot. I don't know what to tell you. Something along the lines of just something normal, just like be welcome, have a seat. What are you drinking? Let's say that. What are you drinking?
All righty. Well, this was another edition of One Plus One, All Things Canada edition between, and I hope I'm not going to butcher your last name, with our mayoral candidates for Kingston, Ontario, Ivan Stoiljkovic, right?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Fantastic. Well, Ivan, best of luck with your campaign. But this is not the last time we're going to be speaking. We are going to try to do another interview with some of your colleagues who are also running. But until then, best of luck on your campaign. I hope you win. And if I was in Canada, which unfortunately I'm not, I would be campaigning for you and trying to get like-minded lefties to be supporting your campaign. So best of luck with your campaign, and we will talk again very soon, I hope.
Thank you, Youri. Thank you so much. It was so much fun.
Likewise.